Welcome to Betrayal Affairs. In today's video, I'm going to share a story that has haunted me every single day since it happened. It's not easy to tell, and maybe part of me hopes that by telling it, I can make sense of how everything spiraled so far out of control. This is my truth, and once you hear it, you'll understand why my life will never be the same again. It all started with a phone call from my best friend, Mia. Mia and I had been inseparable since college. She was the kind of friend who knew every detail of my life, my fears, my dreams, the things I never said out loud to anyone else. When my mother died, Mia stayed with me in my apartment for a week just to make sure I ate and didn't fall apart. We weren't just friends, we were sisters by choice. So when she asked me for a favor that evening, I didn't hesitate for even a second. Mia, of course. Whatever you need, I told her, balancing the phone against my shoulder as I tried to clean up the kitchen. Her voice sounded rushed, frazzled. Listen, my brother Ethan's in town. He was supposed to stay at my place tonight, but something came up with work, and I can't be there. Would you mind if he stayed at your place? Just one night. Ethan. I hadn't thought about him in years. I remembered him from our college days. Mia's younger brother who used to tag along whenever he visited campus. Back then, he was just a kid in my eyes. Tall, awkward, always cracking jokes that made Mia roll her eyes. He couldn't have been more than 17 or 18 the last time I saw him. Ethan? I repeated, almost surprised by the name. It's been ages. How old is he now? 24, Mia said quickly. But don't worry, he's grown up a lot since you last saw him. He's responsible. He just needs a place to crash until tomorrow. 24. The number echoed in my head as I leaned against the counter. 7 years since I'd last seen him. And now he wasn't a kid anymore. Still, I didn't question it. Mia was asking me for help, and I'd never say no to her. Of course, I said. Tell him to come by. I'll leave the door unlocked. By the time I hung up, there was this strange flutter in my chest, something I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't nerves, exactly, but it wasn't nothing either. I told myself it was just the oddity of having someone I hadn't seen in years suddenly appear in my space. Nothing more. But when I opened the door an hour later and saw Ethan standing there, everything changed. He was taller than I remembered. Broad shoulders filled out a fitted gray shirt, and his jawline was sharp, defined in a way it never had been before. His eyes, those same mischievous green eyes I remembered from his teenage years, were more intense now, steadier, like he'd lived through something that matured him. For a split second, I froze, caught off guard by the transformation. Hey, he said with a smile, shifting his duffel bag higher on his shoulder. Long time no see. Ethan. I breathed out, trying to mask my surprise. Wow, it's been forever.
Come in.
The sound of his voice, deeper and smoother than I remembered, sent an unexpected ripple through me. I ignored it, forcing myself to step aside so he could enter. He looked around my apartment, the corners of his mouth lifting in a small, appreciative smile. Nice place. Definitely feels like you. I laughed softly. And what exactly does that mean? He shrugged, dropping his bag near the couch.
Warm.
Put together. Comfortable. Exactly how I remember you, honestly. There was again that flutter in my chest. His words, casual as they were, felt heavier than they should have. I shook it off and offered him a drink, trying to act normal. We sat down in the living room, and at first, the conversation was easy, natural. We caught up on life. He told me about his new job, his travels, the way he and Mia still bickered like kids whenever they were together. I laughed more than I had in weeks. But then, as the evening stretched on, something shifted. It was the way he looked at me when I spoke, like he was really listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. It was the way his laugh lingered, warm and genuine, filling the room with an energy I hadn't felt in so long. And it was the way my eyes kept drifting to him when I thought he wasn't looking. At one point, he leaned back on the couch, stretching his arms behind him, and for some reason, my heart skipped. I forced myself to look away, chastising myself silently. This was Ethan, Mia's little brother, off limits in every possible way. I excused myself to the kitchen, trying to collect my thoughts. I poured us both another drink, but my hands trembled as I carried the glasses back. What was wrong with me? Why was I suddenly so aware of the way he moved, the sound of his voice, the intensity of his gaze? When I handed him the glass, his fingers brushed mine. Just a second. Just a fleeting, insignificant touch. But it sent a jolt through me so strong, I nearly dropped the drink. Our eyes met, and for that single breathless moment, it felt like the room around us disappeared. I pulled away quickly, sinking into the opposite side of the couch. My pulse raced, but I forced a smile. So, tell me more about your job. You said you travel a lot. He studied me for a second, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he noticed my sudden shift. Then he nodded, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees as he talked about his work. I listened, nodding, smiling, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was a storm. By the time the clock struck midnight, I told myself it was time for bed. I showed him the guest room, said goodnight, and shut the door to my own bedroom with a sigh of relief. Finally, I was alone. But I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every glance, every laugh, every fleeting touch. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. He was Mia's brother. He trusted me.
Mia trusted me.
But the more I told myself to stop, the more the thoughts consumed me. At one point, I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen for water. That's when I saw him again. Ethan was sitting on the couch, shirtless now, scrolling absently through his phone. The soft glow of the screen lit up his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw. For a moment, I just stood there in the doorway, watching him, my breath caught in my throat. He looked up, and our eyes met again. Couldn't sleep? He asked, his voice low, gentle. I shook my head slowly, clutching the glass in my hand like it was the only thing keeping me grounded.
No.
You? Same, he said, setting his phone aside. Too much on my mind. There was a pause. A heavy, charged silence that seemed to stretch between us. And in that silence, something unspoken passed, something neither of us dared to name. I should have turned around. I should have gone back to my room. But instead, I stepped forward. I stepped forward, though every part of my mind screamed at me to stop. My bare feet pressed softly against the hardwood floor, carrying me closer to the living room where Ethan sat. The glow from his phone had faded, and now it was just the dim light from the street outside seeping through the curtains, painting shadows across his face. I told myself I was only walking past him, maybe grabbing a snack from the kitchen, maybe making casual small talk to fill the silence of the night. But when I stopped just a few feet away from him, I knew I wasn't fooling anyone, not him, not myself. You okay? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back into the couch, studying me. His expression was calm, but his eyes, they burned with something I couldn't quite name. Yeah, he said slowly. Just thinking. About a lot of things. I nodded, clutching my glass of water tighter. Same here. It's been a long day. A silence stretched between us again, thick and heavy. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, pounding faster with every second. Finally, he patted the cushion beside him. Sit with me for a bit? Maybe we'll both sleep easier after. My first instinct was to refuse. To say goodnight again, retreat to my room, and lock the door until morning. That would have been the smart thing to do. The right thing to do. But instead, I felt my body moving before my brain could stop it. I crossed the last few steps and sank down beside him on the couch. The air felt different instantly. Closer. Warmer. His shoulder brushed against mine, and I felt my entire body tense, every nerve alive. We didn't speak at first. We just sat there, side by side, the silence humming like electricity. Finally, he broke it. You know, I used to have the biggest crush on you. The words hit me like a shockwave. I turned my head slowly, staring at him. What? He smiled faintly, almost sheepishly. Back when I was younger. Every time I visited Mia at college, I hoped you'd be around. You were always so confident, so put together. You had this energy about you that I couldn't stop noticing. My throat went dry. Ethan, I know, he said quickly, lifting his hands as if to wave away the weight of his confession. I was just a kid back then. It was nothing. But sitting here with you now, it's hard not to remember that. His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I couldn't look away. There was no laugh in his expression now, no teasing tone. Just raw, unfiltered honesty. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. That was a long time ago. Yeah, he said softly. But some things don't fade.
I should have gotten up right then.
I should have walked away, ended the conversation, pretended none of this was happening. But instead, I stayed frozen, caught in the pull of his gaze. I don't know what you're trying to say, I whispered, though deep down I already knew. He leaned closer, just slightly, his voice dropping. I think you do. The space between us shrank to almost nothing, and for a terrifying, intoxicating moment, I thought something irreversible was about to happen. My chest rose and fell rapidly, my thoughts tangled in guilt and desire. But then I pulled back. I stood abruptly, nearly spilling the water in my glass. I should go to bed, I blurted, my voice shaky. It's late. Ethan's expression didn't change much, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, something like disappointment, or maybe restraint. He nodded slowly.
Yeah.
You're right. Good night. I hurried to my room, shut the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. My entire body trembled, like I had just escaped something dangerous. And maybe I had. But even as I crawled back into bed, I knew the danger wasn't gone. It was still there, lingering in the walls of my apartment, in the space between Ethan and me. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The next morning, I woke to the sound of soft movement in the kitchen. My heart leapt before I even opened my eyes, and when I did, the memory of the night before came crashing back. I told myself to stay calm, to act normal, to pretend nothing had happened. When I walked into the kitchen, Ethan was already there, making coffee. He looked up and smiled. Morning. I forced a smile back. Morning. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and the normalcy of the moment felt almost surreal. We sat across from each other at the table, sipping from our mugs, talking about little things, traffic, the weather, his plans for the day. On the surface, it was ordinary. But underneath, every word carried the weight of what almost happened last night. As he talked, I found myself watching the way his hands wrapped around the mug, the way his lips curved when he smiled. And every time our eyes met, I felt that same spark ignite, the one I was desperately trying to ignore. At one point, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and chuckled. It's Mia. She's checking on me already. The mention of her name jolted me back to reality.
Mia.
My best friend. His sister. If she had any idea what was happening inside my head right now, she'd never forgive me. I excused myself quickly, pretending I had work to do. I retreated to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands. This has to stop, I whispered to myself. It can't go any further. But even as I said the words, I knew how fragile my resolve was. Because the truth was, part of me didn't want it to stop. The day passed slowly. Ethan spent most of it out, meeting up with a friend for lunch, exploring the city. I tried to distract myself with chores, with work, with anything that would keep my mind from wandering back to him. By evening, when he returned, the tension between us had settled into something quieter, but no less potent. We ordered takeout, watched a movie, and for a while, I almost convinced myself that everything was fine, that we were just two people sharing a space for a night. But then the power flickered. It was late, the movie halfway through, when the lights suddenly dimmed and went out completely. The apartment plunged into darkness, leaving only the faint glow of the city lights outside. "Oh, great," I muttered, fumbling for my phone. Ethan laughed softly. "Guess it's a blackout." We lit a couple of candles and sat together in the flickering glow. The shadows danced across the walls, and somehow, the intimacy of the moment deepened. "This feels like one of those stories you tell years later," Ethan said, his voice low. "You know, the night the lights went out and everything changed." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. "Nothing has to change," I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. He leaned closer, his eyes searching mine. "But what if it already has?" My breath caught. I felt the air shift between us, heavy and charged. The candlelight flickered, and in that fragile, suspended moment, it felt like the universe itself was daring me to give in. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, trying to resist. But then I felt the warmth of his hand brush against mine on the couch. Just the slightest touch, but it shattered the last of my defenses. My heart thundered in my chest, my thoughts a blur of guilt and longing. I didn't move my hand away. And in that instant I knew the line had already been crossed. The blackout didn't last long, maybe half an hour at most. But when the lights came back on, the world looked different. Or maybe it was just me who had changed. We didn't speak much after that. The silence said enough. He went to his room, and I went to mine, but I lay awake again, staring into the dark, knowing nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Mia called me. "Thanks again for letting Ethan crash," she said cheerfully over the phone. "You're a lifesaver." Her voice, warm and trusting, pierced through me like a knife. I forced a laugh, trying to keep my tone steady. "Of course. Anytime." But as I hung up, guilt washed over me in waves. I couldn't keep doing this, not to her, not to myself. Something had to give. The problem was, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to. After Mia's call, I spent the entire day trying to avoid Ethan. I buried myself in work, cleaning, errands, anything that kept me busy, anything that kept me away from him. But avoiding him only made the tension worse. Every time I passed him in the hallway, every time our eyes met across the living room, I felt it, the unspoken, undeniable pull between us. It hung in the air like a storm about to break, and I was terrified of when it finally would. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed space. I grabbed my keys and told Ethan I was heading out for a walk. He nodded, not pressing, but there was something in his gaze that followed me long after I shut the door. The cool night air should have calmed me. It didn't. I walked aimlessly through the city streets, replaying everything in my head. Mia's voice, full of trust. Ethan's confession, full of honesty. My own weakness, every time I let myself linger too close to him. By the time I returned, I had made a decision. It had to end tonight. Whatever this was, whatever I was letting happen, it couldn't continue. I wouldn't risk losing Mia. I wouldn't risk losing myself. I opened the door quietly, expecting Ethan to be in his room. But he wasn't. He was in the living room, sitting on the couch in the dark. The sight of him there, waiting, made my stomach drop. He looked up as I entered, his face unreadable in the shadows. "You've been gone a while," he said softly. "Yeah," I murmured, setting my keys on the counter. "I needed some air." He nodded, but didn't move. The silence stretched between us again, heavy, suffocating. Finally, I spoke. "Ethan, this has to stop." His jaw tightened. "I know." I blinked, caught off guard by his agreement. "You do?" "Of course I do," he said, standing now, stepping closer. "I know this is wrong. I know Mia would kill us both if she ever found out." But he trailed off, his eyes locking on mine with that same intensity that had haunted me all night. "That doesn't change how I feel." My chest tightened. "And how do you feel?" He took another step closer, close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from him. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Like I've been waiting years for this." My breath caught. My mind screamed at me to run. to end it, to say no. But my body betrayed me, rooted to the spot, trembling with the weight of his words. "Ethan," I whispered, but the rest of the sentence never came. Because in that moment, all the walls I had built, all the reasons I had told myself to stay away, came crashing down. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of confusion and guilt. Ethan stayed longer than planned, one excuse after another keeping him in my apartment. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, wondering how much longer we could keep pretending nothing was happening. But Mia wasn't stupid. She knew me too well. One afternoon, she called again, her voice casual but curious. "So, how's Ethan?" "He hasn't said much to me about his stay." I froze. My mind scrambled for something safe to say. "He's fine. Quiet. Mostly keeps to himself."
Mia laughed.
"That doesn't sound like him at all. You sure you're talking about my brother?" I forced a laugh too, but my palms were slick with sweat. She couldn't know. She couldn't even suspect. If she did, everything would fall apart. After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. This couldn't go on. I had to make a choice. Either I ended it, cut Ethan out before it went too far, or I risked losing everything. But every time I tried to convince myself to let go, I thought about the way he looked at me, the way he made me feel seen in a way no one else had in years. And the truth was, I wasn't ready to let that go. The breaking point came one evening when Mia decided to stop by. She texted me out of the blue. "I'm 5 minutes away. Thought I'd come hang out with you guys for a bit." My blood ran cold. I ran to the living room where Ethan was lounging on the couch. "Mia's coming," I hissed. He sat up, startled.
"Now?"
"Why?" She's on her way. We have to act normal. Like nothing's going on." The panic in my voice must have given me away because his expression hardened. "You think she'll notice?" "Yes," I snapped, pacing the room. "She always notices. We can't slip up." He stood, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "Then we won't. We'll be careful." But his confidence only made me more nervous. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I could be careful, not around him. When the knock came at the door, my heart nearly stopped. I plastered a smile on my face as I opened it.
"Mia."
"Hey." She swept inside, hugging me tightly before turning to her brother.
"Ethan."
"You didn't tell me you were having such a good time here." He smiled easily, that same disarming grin I'd seen 100 times. "Didn't think I needed to give you every detail." Mia rolled her eyes, settling onto the couch. "Well, I'm here now. So, what's been going on?" I sat across from her, forcing myself to breathe evenly, to answer her questions without hesitation. Ethan chimed in smoothly, his voice steady, his demeanor calm. To anyone else, it would have seemed like a normal evening. But inside, I was crumbling. Every glance felt dangerous. Every pause in conversation felt loaded. And every time Mia laughed, oblivious, I felt the weight of the secret pressing down harder. At one point, she excused herself to the bathroom. The moment she was out of sight, Ethan's eyes met mine across the room. The look in them made my stomach flip, part warning, part longing. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. When Mia returned, we carried on like nothing had happened. She stayed for another hour, chatting, laughing, completely unaware of the war raging beneath the surface. But as soon as she left, the air in the apartment shifted. I turned on Ethan, my voice shaking. "Do you see now? Do you see how dangerous this is?" He stepped closer, his expression intense. "I see it. But I also see you. And I'm not ready to let you go." My throat tightened, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. "And if Mia finds out?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, gently brushing his fingers against mine. The touch was so small, so innocent, and yet it carried the weight of everything we weren't saying. If she finds out, he whispered, then we deal with it. Together. My heart ached at his words, torn between the fear of betrayal and the pull of something I couldn't deny. I pulled my hand back, stepping away. I can't do this, Ethan. Not tonight. Not like this. He nodded slowly, though the look in his eyes told me the fight wasn't over.
All right.
Not tonight. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of guilt, fear, and longing. And somewhere deep down, I realized the truth. It wasn't a question of if we'd be discovered. It was only a question of when. And that's where I'll leave you. Because the story doesn't end here. Not really. This was just the beginning, the night everything changed, the moment that set everything in motion. What happened next, well, that's a story for another time.